All right, we're at 2 o'clock, so I shall get started. Just before we start the main presentation, I'm just going to have a quick chat about some online learning etiquette so that we're hopefully all on the same page. We are more than happy to answer questions, but with so many participants, we need to structure it well. If you do find that you have a question or something isn't clear, please type it in the Zoom chat. My co-host, Alan, he'll keep an eye on those questions and I'll refer to him at points during our presentation for him to present those questions for us. If you want to retract your question, as in maybe it suddenly gets answered a slide later before we get a chance to ask questions, just let Alan know in the chat as well. We hope to answer as many other questions as possible by the end of today's session, but it might not be possible, so do get in contact afterwards. I've got a link shortly that shows you how to do that as well. And please make sure that your video is switched off and your microphone is muted. It cuts down on background noise for other participants, and if my internet connection doesn't have to try and load 50 videos at once, it means I can run everything a lot smoother as well at this end. So please do make sure videos are off and microphones are muted the whole time. All right, so welcome to Arranging for Beginners. I'm Simon Arnott. My co-host answering the questions is Alan Hughes, and I'm sure many of you know who he is. So we're here to hopefully guide you through this session. First things first, just a couple of little things about what we might have in this session. So the idea is that this is one, and it's kind of almost a mathematical approach to arranging. It doesn't mean it's the only way to start arranging, but it's very much one way that we could start. And it is very much the basics. I feel very strongly that when learning to write or arrange a new style of music, you very much need to go over the complete basics and learn the exact rules before trying any other sorts of experiments. If anyone listening has ever studied music, particularly kind of past going into like A-level and beyond, you might well be familiar with Bach chorales. I'm treating this in a very, very similar fashion of where you learn the rules and you keep to them. Eventually, people like Bach, they didn't follow their own rules, but they knew their rules and how to break them. So we're very looking at the specifics, the basics, therefore an almost mathematical approach to arranging in the barbershop style. If any questions are not answered, or if there's anything that you'd like more on next week, you can also contact me at the website there as well on the screen. Please feel free to do that. We might not get through everything this week. I've got quite a chunky slide for this first week, and anything that we don't get through this week, we'll then do next week. So we'll get through as much as we can today, and it depends on how many questions we have and how long it takes to answer those as to how easily we're going to be able to get through everything, but we will get through everything over the 2 weeks. So the first thing when starting to arrange is make sure you're trying music that is easily arranged into the barbershop style. Many arrangers are doing lots of different styles of music now and trying to move it into the barbershop style and arrange it in particular ways that work for the barbershop style. A lot of those are often very complicated. We want to try and get rid of all of the complications when first starting. We want to make it nice and straightforward so we can learn the basic rules and therefore know how to apply those to more complicated things. So choose music that easily fits the style. So I suggest American popular music from kind of the early 1900s and in the 1800s. This stuff often lends itself really well to barbershop. That's where it all started from, arranging songs from this kind of style of popular music. There are lots of collections of this music online. Lots of universities in the US have different collections of popular music that you can look at online. I've put one on there that I've used before and found lots of music on, which is really good for just trying things out and practicing and learning how to do it. So pick the old songs to try it with, because they're going to be the ones that naturally fit the style. Not all of the music on these things, obviously being from the 1800s and early 1900s, not all of them are going to be appropriate for performance. So please do actually double check the songs before you, particularly if you're then going to want to perform them. but again, arrange them, make sure they're suitable content in the songs. And again, not all of them are public domain in the UK. The copyright things are different across different countries. Some of them are public domain in the US, but not in the UK. But you can use them to do some practicing of stuff. It's only when it then gets to properly publishing or performing that we need to worry about the rights for that. If you're just taking 8 bars from the song and practicing and learning how to do stuff, that's fine in an educational way. So choosing music again, what does the music need? So we need something that's got not too strenuous a melody line. So generally staying within a tenth. The idea being is that because we've got our lead part and a certain part, we want the tenor to be able to go above it and we want the bass to be able to go below it. If the wider the range of the lead part, the wider the range of the quartet is going to have to be. So it's really important to make sure that it stays within a good chunk of space to make it easier to arrange around. Generally staying with a tenth is going to work. Obviously lots of arrangements move beyond that, but let's keep things simple when we're first going. What we also really want is a lot of circle of fifths, and particularly we really want to hear the secondary dominant. So when we have our circle of fifths chords, I've got a little circle of fifths on the side there. What we're really listening for is the secondary dominant. Now I've got the piano just to my left, so I can quickly play a couple of things to give an example. So if we were in the key of C, our dominant chord of that is G7. If you look round the circle, it goes round to G. They feel very nice and homey. It's like coming home going from G to C. The secondary dominant is where we have the 2 chord. So in the case of C major, that would normally be D minor. If we have the secondary dominant, we're using the major version of that. When we then have this go around the circle, that's when we have our secondary dominant progressions in the circle of fifths. That's really important to be in there to make it have that characteristic barbershop sound. Also, make sure there is a variety of chords. We want the harmonic rhythm to not be too slow. So that basically means we want the chords to be changing up pretty regularly. A lot of modern songs have the same chord for a very long stretch of time. We want it to be changing up because that suits barbershop best. Make sure it also has a really straightforward structure. So a lot of the things we have might have intro, verse, chorus, and simple structures. If you're never sure whether a structure works, look at arrangements that you know work really well and think, okay, look at them. Okay, this has an intro here. It's then got a chorus and a bridge and a chorus. Okay, I understand that might be a way of looking around things. And again, the phrase lengths within that are going to be straightforward phrase lengths. So bars of 8 or 16 length, as they feel very comfortable when we are singing. I'll quickly do this side, then I'll see if there are any questions after this one. So the barbershop chords that we're most likely to find, there are 11 chords going on, and a lot of them are, you kind of twist and they're sort of interrelated. But let me just give you a quick play of what some of those are. So the first 6 that we're going to look at here are based around the major triad, and here's that first major triad. Just our straightforward major chord. We then have the dominant 7th, or the barbershop 7th. So obviously one of the chords that's really very much part of barbershop. And then we have the dominant 9th. Again, we hear this quite a lot. We quite often call this the barbershop 9th. What you'll notice is there are 5 notes in that chord, and obviously we only have 4 singers. So normally one of those notes is missed out. It's often the tonic is missed out of that one. So in this case on there, it would be the C. Or sometimes we also miss out the 5th. Both of those are acceptable, and you play around with the inversions to make those works. We also have the major 6th. We have the major 7th. And we also have the major 9th. Again, we have 5 notes in that one, and we'll pretty much always leave out the major 7th of that one. So you can hear the major 7th. That one is gone now. So we'll then keep to just those 4 notes. Generally, when it comes to the major 7th, the major 9th, the major 6th, if that chord is being implied, it's normally because the lead part is given us that note. We generally will stick to the other ones if possible. Then we've got some chords based around the minor triad. There's the minor triad for you. Then the minor 6th, which, depending on which note you leave out of the dominant 9th that we looked at a moment ago, can be quite closely related. And we also have the minor 7th, which we'll find often in part of our circular fifths when sometimes we don't have the major 3rd in it. And then finally, we have 2 symmetrical chords, the augmented chord. So a symmetrical chord is where you have the exact amount of space in between all of the notes. And it means you only then have 3 notes, and it just keeps going on all the way up in that symmetrical pattern. And we also have the diminished 7th. Again, there's the same amount of space between each note in the chord. The augmented one, generally we're only going to get that if the lead is singing the augmented 5th in that chord. I'm just going to pass over to Alan Hughes for a second, just in case he has any questions. I've given a good spiel there. I wonder if there are any questions up to now.
Yeah, one question from Tom has literally just come up, and there's been other questions asking about if this will be available afterwards. The answer to that is yes, we're streaming live to YouTube, and as soon as we stop the stream, you'll be able to view the video back on YouTube as well. But the question from Tom was, if you've got a major 9th with the 7th missing, how do you know it's a major 9th and not a dominant 9th? Is it because the dominant 9th never omits the 7th?
Yeah, so the dominant 9th has a very different 7th in there. So the dominant 9th has a flattened 7th. So if you listen to the dominant 9th here, that one there is the flattened 7th in there. So that's the one that is different. The major 9th has the major 7th. Hence why it's called the major 9th. So that would be the difference between those, and how you would know the difference between those chords.
Okay, thank you. We've just had a question come up from Tim, which asks, what is harmonic rhythm? I don't know whether now is the right time to discuss that, or if there's a...
Cool. Harmonic rhythm is just basically the speed at which chords go past in your song. So if you have a slow harmonic rhythm, it means your chords don't change very often. If you have a fast harmonic rhythm, the chords change pretty regularly. Generally in barbershop, we have ones that change at least once a bar, that kind of speed for our music.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's all for now.
Cheers. Thank you, Alan. So we've got a piece to try and arrange. I'm going to go relatively quickly through some of these points, knowing that it's also available afterwards so that you can listen to some things again. And I'm going to go through a variety of steps. And at the end of each step, I'll offer a chance for anyone to ask questions at those points. So step 1, make sure you've got a piece to arrange. And the first thing is going to be to analyze it. I've chosen Love's Old Sweet Song here. It's one that I've actually done an arrangement of for my quartet Trailblazers. So I thought it would be a good one, as I know it a little bit better than some other songs. So it'll be good for me to talk about this one. The very first thing that I do as soon as I start arranging a song is I sing it, or I play it, or I listen to it a lot. And I will do that for a very long time normally. If I get given a commission of some sort, I will at least listen to the song for a couple of weeks before I even attempt it, to make sure that that's kind of really sunken in. So really make sure you get familiar with the song straight away. Now analyze it, we want to make sure we know what chords are going on. And generally, this is almost kind of like a pre-step 1, as you'll need to do this for checking that the piece is actually going to work harmonically if you're writing strictly in the barbershop style. So I've taken a little chunk out of Love's Old Sweet Song, and it's time to have a little bit of a scribble on it, as the chords aren't written out on there already. So I'm going to have to work out what those are. So I start to write some things down on the score and I'm looking at the basics first. Okay, what key are we in? We're in A flat for this one. What key, time signature in? We're in 3/4 for this one. It changes during this song. Sometimes you'll have like an intro in 4 and a chorus in 3 and vice versa. There's lots of different things that can happen with the time signature to just make sure you know what you're in. So those are the basics, and I've also got that extra blue line on there to look at how long are the phrases. So this is a straightforward 8-bar phrase, and it goes in mostly in 8-bar phrases in this piece. So it's a straightforward piece with structure-wise, so hopefully a good start to doing some barbershop with it. Then I'm looking at the chords that exist on there. So here's my next scribble in the pink. And I've got those chords written out. So what I've done is I've looked at the music that's written in the piano part, and I've used the notes in there to decide what the chord is on those bars and whether they change between them. So obviously we go from A flat to E flat 7 to E flat 7 to A flat to C7 to F minor 7 to B flat 7 to E flat 7, and then we just on the other side of that blue line we go back to A flat. Now what I've also done is I've put the Roman numerals of those chords above. I quite like using the Roman numerals in this kind of way because then whatever key I transpose the song into, I know that 1 is 1 rather than, okay, if it was an A flat then, now in this key I'm going to be in this. So actually keeping the Roman numerals there for me is a really good way of seeing it as a whole and knowing exactly what's going on. I've also put some extra little blue arrows on there, which shows you my circle of fifths going on in this part of the arrangement. So we're in the key of A flat, and we're quite happy in this key, our nice barbershop key. So our nice barbershop circle happens a little bit to the end of this phrase. So we start off on our A flat, we then move to our E7, and we go back to our A flat. I have to excuse my piano playing, it's normally terrible. Now then we move through a circle of fifths going from C7 to F minor 7. Oops, I told you my piano playing was terrible. Then into B flat 7, then into E flat 7, back to A flat. So we have that circle pattern going around, and it makes it really clear that this could be something good for barbershop. In particular, as I said before, that secondary dominant notated by the fact that my Roman numeral there for that B flat 7 is it's a dominant 7th. So really wanting to make sure that we see that secondary dominant in there. The capital Roman numerals, those ones are the major version of that chord. So the major triad or the dominant 7th. If they're not capitalized, then we're looking to like the 6, 7 that we've got in there for the F minor 7. We know that it's the minor variant of that chord. So I can see clearly here, I've got a nice big 2, 7 in there that's going to make it have that real barbershop feel without having to do any extra work. Then what I also do is have a little look at what notes might cause me problem whilst I'm arranging it. So thinking, okay, which notes in the melody are not part of that chord? So I've underlined those there in green. So looking, I'll just give a couple of these as an example. On Just a Song, that A in there, that's on an F. And that F isn't part of our A flat chord, which would just be A flat C and E flat. So I'm just noting that for future reference to know that that could be a complication within that chord. And I've looked through all of the other notes, any of the ones that are not part of that straightforward chord, I've underlined for me to think about later and see if I need to do anything differently on those melody notes. Okay, before I start step 2, are there any questions on analysing those chords?
Yes, there's been a few questions come in actually, Simon.
Okay.
I think the first one actually relates back to the way you showed us the different chords that you could possibly choose from. And they asked, are these chords for barbershop music in a major key, and would they be different for a song that was written in a minor key? On this page here, I'm not having anything specific to do with the key that they're in. They're just kind of chords that will appear. Generally, if we're writing in the barbershop style, we're going to probably be in a major key anyway. It's much rarer that we choose something in a minor key, as it works much better using the major keys in general. But
but here I've just kind of written them all using no key signature, just to show the different chords that we might see in Barbershop. As obviously that first chord in there is a C major triad. The dominant seventh of C is not C7. These are just examples of the chords that we see, all based around starting on C.
Thank you. Next question, in a major sixth chord, again, this is similar. Do you include the fifth or leave it out?
I'll probably come on to this a little bit later when we're doing looking at the non-chord notes in the lead part. That's a kind of either or. Quite often the sixth, if it's in the melody, will replace the fifth, and you would just have as the four notes rather than having that one in there as well. But sometimes you will quite often hear at the end of songs, particularly before a big slide, sometimes it makes a nice jazzy chord if you kind of change the inversions around. So it's going to be a character thing that you choose for that chord.
Thank you. And then the final one we've got at the moment, if you go to your slide with the chord analysis of Love's Old Sweet Song, they have asked in the second bar, why have you labelled that as an E flat 7 when the bass has got a B flat in it?
Basically the chord has been rooted with the fifth. So if I was being very exact, I would then probably put a forward slash and a B flat after that one to show that I'm rooting it with the B flat. But if you check the rest of the piano part, the notes that are evident in that bar are E flat, D flat, G, and B flat. So we know that those are the notes of E flat 7. And generally, because in Barbershop, I'm going to have to change around the voicings and change the inversions of chords to make sure that we get all four notes. I don't tend to worry too much about which one is originally rooted in the piano chord.
Thank you, Simon. That's all for now.
Cheers. Thank you, Alan. Right. So step 2 is a nice kind of straightforward thing, and it's just write out the melody. It's nice to you can give yourself a pat on the back once you've done that. You've done your first bit and you haven't really had to do much thinking. So we're making sure that we either stick with the key that we had in the original, or we change the key to something that's more appropriate for our singer. So that's, again, like I said before, why I like using the Roman numerals, because it then just means I can immediately see what's 1, what's 5, rather than having to constantly try and transpose all the different notes as I look at it. So for this one, I've actually kept it in the same key that the original was in, as I thought this would fit most lead singers there. You can just about see it in there. I've written in that melody exactly the same as it was before. What you also need to look at when writing out the melody, are there any points that are too high or too low? I've put an example range of a male lead on this page, but I don't really like to get too involved in specific ranges, as it can sometimes make things a little bit more confusing. It's best to have a group in mind when arranging, even if you're just doing it for yourself to think about, have a think about your chorus or your quartet. What are the ideal ranges? It's always best to have someone in mind when writing, even if you're not actually going to perform it with them or so on. So use the ranges that you know that the people have to do those. But I've put a vague example of a potential lead range that we might see. But I think hopefully D to G is relatively okay, and generally we see that in a lot of arrangements at the moment. But G is definitely a stretch, definitely knowing that that's going to be high for some lead sections. You may choose to take that down a little bit. But nice and straightforward here, because I've chosen a song that's got a melody that works, I've just put it straight into the lead part there. Step 2 is a short one, but I'll take any questions on that if there are.
None yet, Simon, no.
Cool, I'm hoping that one was nice and straightforward, so I'm glad. Right, step 3, we're going to write out the first ideas for a bass part. As I said at the beginning, this is a very almost mathematical way of approaching it and just looking specifically at the ideals and the ideal rules that we can follow when arranging Barbershop. So the basses tend to use either 1 or 5 of the prevailing chord in that bar, mostly because that's going to give us the best kind of foundation to ring a chord off of. So we want to use either 1 or 5 of the chord for the bass. In 3-part chords, like a major triad, we're going to probably double the root of that. So if we're in A flat major at the moment, we're probably probably going to double the root when it's just a straightforward major triad. In 4-part chords, we want to try and have all 4 notes. So depending on what the lead is singing, we're either going to use our bass to then sing on 1 or 5 of that chord. Voice leading is also very important at all times. Basses tend to be happier with larger jumps, generally because their parts often do jumps of 4ths or 5ths because of that way we move around the cycle of 5ths, and they're often on either 1 or 5 of those chords. They're quite often moving by that, and they tend to be happy with that sort of voice leading. I've put a range on here again. Like the lead, think about the group you're writing for. This will probably work, but again, you might want to shorten it a little bit if you know the bass section particularly aren't that great high, or if they're not so great low, you might want to raise it a bit. But again, try and think of a group in mind when writing stuff. And if you can't think of a group in mind, then maybe use these ranges to help. So what I did is I went through underneath the lead part, and I wrote in a bass part using just the one of each of those chords. So I've written the chords above in here as well, so you can still see them from where we were before. So where I've got A flat above there in that chord, in that first bar, underneath I've just got the bass singing A flat the whole way through. On the E flat ones, I've just got them E flat, and so on. So this makes it straightforward. On the left of the screen, there is a little table, and here you can see the notes that are in those chords that we've got prevailing across this part of the song. So obviously I'm just using that first one in that the first light blue column for each of those chords, so just using 1. Now some of these chords, the lead is singing 1, and it's a 4 note chord, often the dominant 7th in the case in this bit. So I've circled those ones where maybe we've got the lead and the bass on the same one, where we might want to change them to a different note. So because we know the bass likes to sing 1 or 5, I thought the straightforward thing to do was swap those ones out for the 5 of the chord instead. So if I flick forward one more page, I've hopefully done that. So now you can see the bass part has changed slightly. And in each one where I've changed it from where it was before, we flick back 1 second, there's the blue one circled, and then I change those ones in here to the 5th of that chord instead. So I'm looking at using just 1 or 5 for the bass for now, in comparison to the lead. And if it's a 4 note chord, if the lead is on the 1, then I've moved the bass to the 5 of that chord instead. So again, I'm literally just thinking about this in a completely just a logical way almost, and just writing it in without really thinking about what that whole chord is going to sound like right now. I know that basses are good on 1 and 5. I know that lead is on 1 sometimes, and I might need to swap the bass to 5 after already putting all the bass notes at 1 elsewhere. Are there any questions on step 3, Alan?
Just one. You referred to in a 3-note chord doubling the root.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mean literally doubling, or can that mean an octave as well?
Yes, I pretty much mean an octave. Generally, we're going to keep them in octaves. That's what I will mean by that when I'm saying sort of doubling the root or doubling the third and things like that. Generally, I'm going to say we're going to have them in octaves, so that it's nice and we get that nice range and a full-on barbershop chord going of 4 different notes going on.
That's great. That's all for now, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I kind of think that the lead and the bass, when you're doing this sort of stuff, is relatively straightforward for putting into the music, particularly as the song that I have chosen is one that I know is going to work in the barbershop style. And I can't stress enough that that is probably the most important thing to try and get when you're first doing arranging, is find songs that really work for the barbershop style. It makes a lot of decisions for you, and you learn the correct way of doing things. So then for my step 4, I start thinking the first ideas of my tenor part. In almost all cases, it's probably going to stay above the lead. We want to try and avoid large jumps in the voice leading, and we don't want to get too far spread away from the lead and or the baritone, unless we're maybe using that for effect. But right now, we want to try and keep it relatively close to the lead line and trying to stay above it in one of the other notes that's left in the chord. So I put another little range on there, just like the lead and the bass ranges. Use them if you want to, but again, keep someone in mind, or have a look at some songs that you know work well and look at what ranges those arrangers have used. It's always good to check what other people do and steal ideas from them. That's what all the best composers and arrangers do. So my first ideas of a tenor part. What I did is I went to the lead part and I did one of the notes above that's left over in the chord from what the bass and the lead have done. And I've taken one of the other two notes that's left over and I've put that in and kept it above the lead part. So hopefully you can see across the tenor part sits above the lead and it fills one of the other notes in that blue chart on the left. I've circled a couple in here that are just kind of thinking, okay, are these going to be the best for voice leading for the tenor? So the best way to test if something's good for voice leading or not is to sing it yourself. So generally, when arranging, I will sing little bits of the part through to check that it does make sense and it feels natural to sing. Because if you as the arranger are struggling to sing it, it would be pretty harsh to then try and send that to someone for them to sing. So it's best to make sure that things work really well for the voice leading. So this tenor part at the beginning here, I'm a little bit worried about this voice leading because of those jumps on twilight and lights are low. So if I just play a little bit of that. You can hear that it's not quite so nice to sing. So we might want to have a re-look at those ones. And then I've got on this and the flickering shadows. Quite often, this is just something that my ear found in this one when we had. That was and the flickering shadows softly come and go. There's a lot of descending semitones there. Often those notes feel like they want to go up. So particularly on and the flickering shadows, felt for me that it should more rise there. So let's have a little look at some of those changes. So now I've actually kept the tenor below the lead in a couple of points here. So if we have a look at twilight and lights are low, I've made a couple of changes around here. So twilight, if we can see before I had that jump up to the G. Now I've kept it on the D flat, as sometimes we can go lower than the lead part, particularly if not for very long, and still stay nice and close like that. And it's quite traditional to have that 7th and 1 going on in that part there. So that makes the voice leading a lot easier. Just a song at twilight when the lights are low. It's much easier to sing than what was there before. And then we move into this and the flickering shadows. And the flickering shadows. I've gone up to the F because it just felt like it should move up there. And it felt more natural to sing that way before moving down to the E flat that I had before. You'll also notice that on the when the lights are low, I've changed the bass note on here as well as I moved the tenor to 1. So I've moved the bass onto 5 instead. So really, I've added this tenor part in. Again, I'm mostly thinking about, does this technically work? Have I got all the notes I need in the chord? Is the voice leading going to be relatively okay for whoever has to sing this at the end of the day? With that shadows, there are lots of different choices we could then make with that. And this is kind of more of a embellishment kind of thing, which I'm not really going to touch on this week, as those are more complicated. We want to try and get the real basics just in before we start thinking about some of that. So I've got 2 options here for shadows, where we had that, or we could have. Both work. One of those things that will be a preference as an arranger, what you might feel like doing. Are there any questions on step 4, writing out the tenor part?
No, not at all.
No, okay. I shall keep going then. Right, so step 5 will be writing out any first ideas of the baritone part. And it's kind of where the baritones get their name from, filling in the gaps at the end, the notes that nobody else wanted, particularly in the way I'm going with this method. That is exactly what we are doing with the baritones. Voice leading, again, we're wanting to avoid awkward jumps. But if you're going to put an awkward jump in one part, generally it goes into the baritone. They've started to get used to dealing with them because people keep giving them to them. But we still, the better the voice leading, the better someone can sing it, the better the chord's going to ring. So we do need to kind of have a balance there. Again, I put a range in, but baritones might not quite sing that high, or might not quite sing that low. Again, think about the groups that you're writing for. So my first attempt at chucking in a baritone part, all I did was fill in the other note of the 4 or 3 that I have on the left of the screen that I hadn't used yet. And it was as simple as that. And I think if I hit the button, we should hopefully be able to hear it. And there we go. Hopefully we heard that. We can now hear that it sounds very barbershop because we've just been straightforward. We've picked a song that's very obviously barbershop, and we've just filled in those notes using some basic rules. Now what we have to do is have a look at this and think, okay, is the baritone voice leading good enough? Is it simple to sing? Just a song at twilight when the lights are low. It's quite jumpy. We might have a look at some different alternatives for that bit. And the flickering shadows softly come and go. Again, it's a little bit jumpy. We might have a look and see if we can smooth it out a little bit across some of the other parts as well. And that's where we then get to step 6. Are there any questions on step 5, filling in the gaps?
There isn't, Simon. No, you're doing a great job.
Okay, hopefully I'm not losing anyone, and hopefully we can keep going. So editing, this is, like I'm saying, find the awkward voice leading. Sing it, find it. If you can't sing it, you can't give it to someone else to sing. You've got to make sure you know how it's going. Are there any non-chord notes that we need to deal with? Those ones that we did underline with the green earlier, are there any things that we need to fix there? We also want to look vertically and horizontally. So horizontal being our voice leading kind of stuff, vertical being have we got all 4 notes of the chord. Look at it in small chunks, 4 bars. Okay, voice leading good in these 4 bars, right? Add another 4 bars. Is it working? So this process is the one where we really make sure that things are working really nicely. So here I've got 2 options of a baritone part. There's the one I sang just a second ago. Just a song at twilight when the lights are low. It's okay, we got a little bit jumps, but it's not particularly difficult to sing. Just a song at twilight when the lights are low. Okay, I've got 2 options there of how I can sing that. I don't think there's really any of either of them particularly more complicated than the other. So I reckon that one would be a kind of personal choice sort of thing. So the difference in there really is in that first bar of whether we want where the melody goes, just a song at, do we want the whole chord to lift with the melody, or do we want the chord to be more consistent? So here's the just chord. And it's then deciding whether we want song to be, or whether we want song to be, where we have that slightly higher thing going on there with the baritone and tenor. So both seem to be relatively readable in terms of singing. So it's then working out, okay, which one do I prefer for my arrangement? Now I'm going to look at the non-chord notes in this section, the ones that aren't in that box on the left in the blue. So my first one is on the just that F. Now that there is the 6th of that chord. So if here's our scale, it's that one there, that F. So we're looking at, okay, how does this one work? Now the melody, if it's on the 6th scale degree of the prevailing chord, often we will omit the 5th. So in this case, that's what I've done. Because the lead was already on the 5th beforehand, there's no point jumping else someone down to that 5th, because that's going to create some awkward voice leading probably for the baritone. Just a song at, which would be horrible to sing. And I feel like actually kind of when it's that low, you probably don't really need the 5th and the 6th together like that. So again, like I said before with the major 6th chord, it's a choice thing. Generally, we'll omit the 5th and have the 6th instead if it's in the melody. So there's the 1 and 5. Instead, we have 1 and 6. It's kind of like a badly weighted minor chord, having like 2 of the 3rd, but it passes through very quickly. So we just kind of want that to get through, and that works for us there. If it was maybe a high 6th, we might start thinking about adding the 2 of them together if you wanted some sort of high jazzy chord. It gives that completely different feeling when we do that. The on the at there as well, again, I kept it as just the 6, but I'm going to show a different way of doing that in a moment. Then on when the lights, the chord, the is, again, we're on an F, but our prevailing chord this time is E flat 7, which gives us E flat, G, B flat, and D flat, and we've added F to that. If we remember back to our chord, that gives us our dominant 9th chord. There's that F there at the top. So we can use that one in that chord. Now, quite often, and probably most times, we then omit the root. And luckily the leaders just come off of that one. So it's nice and easy to just keep that note omitted and replace it with the 9th. So instead of having this that we had on the chord before, we've now got, and it seems to work for us. Now here's a couple of different options that we might take with that third note of that first bar. So thinking on that at just a song at twilight. Because we're always looking for a circle of fifths, I thought, well, the F is also in 2/7. Our B flat 7, or in this case, I've kept it as a minor one because I didn't want to make it have a secondary dominant that early on, because I want to keep us nice and feeling like we're in the correct key of A flat. So there I put instead 2 examples with our 2 different baritone parts that we didn't decide between before, but moving that at chord to the 2/7 instead. So that's potentially a way of dealing with that. So here, again, I've looked at different things, and there's maybe some funny voice leading here. But what I might do actually, just because some of those concepts are a little tricky and we're towards the end of our time, maybe if I take any questions on that bit we've just had now, if there are any.
There aren't any, Simon, no.
Oh, okay. I'll keep going for a few more minutes, and then I imagine we'll finish roughly on time and see if and finish off anything that we haven't got to next time. So this bit here, I'm looking at the voice leading of that baritone part, that one that felt funniest before. And the flickering shadows. I've got quite a few jumps in there that I might want to avoid. There are lots of different ways you could then do that, and I would suggest trying as many as possible. So these ones, I kind of want that shadows on the baritone in the next bar, so I want to fix this bar before. And the flickering shadows seems to work quite nicely, and we can use those notes. It just means we have to change the baritone to the 1 of that chord on the ring of flickering and move the bass to the 5. This then gives us some different opportunities with the bass and where we want them to make what is probably going to be a larger jump, as they're going to land on the F of the next bar in the shadows. So we want to make sure that we can get to that relatively easily. So I decided to make sure that the jump happens around this G that we've got. So we've got and the flickering, or and the flickering, and the flickering. So we've got 3 different options for the bass on there. And for this, I just sang it through a few times and decided which one I preferred singing the most. In the case when I originally arranged this song, I was arranging it for myself, and that made it the easy option to do. A couple more non-chord notes in there. We have the and the on that the chord. We have that D flat there, which gives us this chord. Just gives us one of our kind of close to one of our diminished chords that we have there. So it's kind of like our where we have our Barbershop 9, but we've just flattened that a little bit and we end up with a half diminished chord instead. So again, that's one of the things that we can sometimes use within our song. And then on Softly Come and Go, on the Lee of Softly, we land on the 9 there again, and it gives us that dominant 9th instead of the dominant 7th. So we're just adding that 9th chord in. So and again, both times I've just omitted the root instead. I shall hit a button and hopefully it will play through the final decisions that I made on this arrangement. And there we have it, our finished arrangement. I just wondered if there are any final little questions there. If not, I will see you all again next week.
There's no questions come up in the chat, but if anyone's very quick at typing, they can ask one quickly now. But other than that, no more come in now.
Right, well, fantastic. I hope people enjoyed an insight into, as I said, a very methodical way of arranging, and it's a good way to start off. If you do have any questions you think of whilst digesting it, at maybe a slower pace over the week, just shoot me an email. You'll have the slides sent out to you. There's a link on there to contact me, so please do. Thanks so much to Alan for co-hosting this and dealing with any questions that came up. And please do join me again at the same time next week, where I'll look a little bit more into what we can then start doing with an arrangement, and maybe looking at some more problematic areas of music for arranging. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. Goodbye, everyone.